Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. We are on the air. This is Thesis. 3, 2, 1. We are on the air. This is Thesis. Everything is everything. I am your host, Jay Marie. How's it going out there, folks? Hope you're doing well. Thank you for showing up and hanging out with us today. Coming to you live from Zombie Land. Yes, sir. Well, I want to thank you for showing up and hanging out with us today. I hope you find yourself well and safe and healthy. Well, it's been a minute since we've talked, but for those of you who haven't subscribed to us on YouTube, to the channel on YouTube, I put out a webisode a couple weeks back, which was the Mardi Gras parade. So if you haven't seen that, you're going to want to go see that, and I'll put the link in the description. So, when I'm not on here on the audio side, I try to stay busy on the video side, and I'm planning on some things in the future. So please go check that out and make sure you subscribe there. And also, while you're there, while you're subscribing and looking at stuff, go ahead and go to the Facebook stuff too. But all that aside, just wanted to let y'all know I was doing that. It's a nice little video. Oak Cliff Mardi Gras parade was really cool. So go over and check that out. Well, I've been gone for a minute, but you know how I stay busy. I keep my mind busy as much as I can, other than with work and little projects that I got going on here at home and elsewhere. But we'll get into that stuff later on. But I've been thinking for a whole week, because I've been preparing, probably for over a week. So let me start off what I try to do here is through the way we communicate with these ideas, right? I try to use certain language. I try to talk and speak in certain ways because what I want to kind of show throughout this whole thing that we're doing here with the thesis and the conversations that we have is to show that there's a connection between so much of the past and history and the present, philosophy and the stuff that religion tells us and all that, right? So all of you who've been following the show know how we try to find that connection between all these things, right? So therefore, the way I try to bring you these ideas is to try to bring it to you in a manner that's maybe something like generic. So because the world is on fire right now. So when you listen to this as it comes out, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. But instead of making it specifically about that, we can bring up historical things and kind of talk about it in that manner. Because throughout history, there's been examples of all kinds of stuff. Wars and tyrants and republics and, all kinds of stories throughout history. So, there's been books and stories throughout history that tell us these tales of wars and tyrants and kingdoms and battles and whatever. And then there's books like, for instance, so I've been digging into Herodotus' histories, because he goes through and tells the tale of many different nations of the time, through the Persians and the Greeks and the Spartans, like all these nations, and he goes and he tells their histories, somewhat parts of their histories, who ruled what lands and at what time and who battled what. So I've been digging in. I went over it twice. You know how I like to do the audio book versions of stuff, so I've been over it twice in the past couple weeks, getting my mind together on my ideas together on how we're going to bring this to kind of point out that in the world that there is tyrants. History shows us that there's been tyrants. Modern history, recent modern history, World War I, World War II, even a little bit more current, we can see that there are leaders in certain nations that rise to power and then they tyrannize their own people. And once they do that, then they try to tyrannize their neighbors, right? By conquering them or whatever. And there's many examples in modern times that we can look at, But so while I was going over Herodotus' histories, looking over, so he goes over so many different peoples near from the west, from the far east, the Egyptian, like so many different types of people, so many different races of man, and throughout it all, there's common themes when it comes to conquering or ruling. Some conquered because they wanted land. They had plans to build a kingdom. They wanted to rule the world. Some others were more like war-minded societies, like the Spartans. They didn't really care too much about other stuff, wealth and all that. They like to fight. They like to kick butt, and in doing so, that is kind of like what ran their society. Then of course, then you had the Greeks were like republics. They had democracies and those type of things. And you had the Persians which were like tyrants that ruled with strength. So throughout history, we have so many different examples of different leaders of kingdoms and peoples. Leadership. So we're gonna look at it in so many different angles. Okay, not just not even, probably won't even look at it religiously, more like philosophically. Because in Plato's Republic, the whole conversation of the Republic starts when they are trying to, a group of men are trying to examine an idea of justice. What is justice? And from that question, we get what we call Plato's Republic, the book, right? But throughout that conversation, so many ideas are brought up of how to build a city, who should run a city, what kind of types of societies are there. We have democracies, oligarchies, we have tyrannies. You know what I'm saying? Then the Timarchy, I believe it's Timarchy is the one where like they like to fight. I think I'm pronouncing it right. I might not be pronouncing it right. But we have different types of societies, uh, and throughout history, most of history has been most of history has been ran or overlooked or overseen by tyrants. All powerful rulers, whether they're kings or pharaohs or, like some of them call themselves gods, even maybe have had risen to the strength of what you would consider a god, right? In the mythologies of the old or whatever, right? But as time has progressed to where we are now, where democracy is what really, throughout the world, democracy is sort of, what's the standard procedure nowadays. Now, some are a little than others, some are freer than others, but democracy is sort of the way nowadays. Nations have constitutions; they vote for their thing, and then some tyrannical societies have this appearance of democracies where they have an election and then the guy becomes president or prime minister or whatever forever, because they change the rules or they change the constitution or whatever through force or through intimidation or whatever. So it's still under the guise of democracy, but it's actually more like a tyranny, because that one person, that one strongman is who decides basically what's going to happen in that society, even though he might have a parliament or whatever, So in recent modern histories, we can see plenty of examples like that, Even now we have conflicts around the world. We have nations that are stronger than others, trying to conquer their neighbors, that are much weaker than them, that have no armies, that are moving from one type of governance system that they were involved in to democracy. They said, hey, you know what? We're tired of the old way of doing things. We want to try the new way of doing things, which is a democratic society. And the neighbor, which is a big bully, says, no, they want to do it the other way. So they bully them around and attack. So throughout history, that's pretty much been the story where the more powerful empire or kingdom, you know, takes land by beating on the smaller nations in their neighborhood, right? Their neighbors. But then along comes bigger and greater armies and nations that conquer. And then sometimes those who are at the seat of those empires do very good deeds that change, the geography, that change the demographics, that change the course of history. Like we that's one of the things that I really enjoy about Herodotus' histories, is that he goes and tells the story like of Cyrus the Great. you know Cyrus the Great, like we for people who sound from, because they talk about him in the Bible, right? But he was the king or whatever of Persia. uh, but in histories, in Herodotus histories, he tells the story of how he was born, and in the situation, the circumstances of how he became king, and all this. And man, the writing style of Herodotus, which has been, modern critics of Herodotus or whatever say, oh, he kind of elaborated on the way he was writing, because sure, he was a writer, he wanted to tell a tale while he was recording these histories of things that actually happened, supposedly, or many people refer to Herodotus for historical reference. They'll say, well, Herodotus said that the Greeks da da da. So they'll use Herodotus as a historical reference, right? So we can assume and we can trust that the writings of Herodotus are as close to accurate as possible, right? So when we look at Cyrus the Great, now, as the his story of how, a lot of stories, like when we think of stories that we recognize, like Moses, right? Oh, they found them in the river in the little basket, right? And then they tried to, like Jesus, they ordered to kill all the babies, and they hide the babies. So these kind of stories, throughout history, the heroes, certain gods or pharaohs, they had their beginning kind of always told a similar tale of them being saved in some way, where they were meant to be killed, or something like that. But the God or the angels or somebody saved them from this demise, right? Now, how we think around here is, I believe that there is something to that. um you know it's that. But now, like for instance, let's think of Cyrus. It's that I took some notes here, so I don't really work off of notes, but I was really interested in what we're going to talk about, so I just wrote a couple of things to remind me, of those things. Anyway, so there was the king of the Achaemenid, uh, of Media. The places they called it Media, right? The king of Media, of the Medes, Astyages, right? And he had a dream that his daughter, from her womb, in the dream was something like, from her womb came a water that covered the entire nation. And he started getting scared. He was saying, "Oh man, maybe from her, she's gonna have a child who's gonna take over my kingdom." And then he had another dream where from her womb, roots came and grew deep and covered the kingdom. So at that point, he got kind of like, paranoid about her child that she was about to have, that he was going to take over the kingdom. So he got one of so while we're so real quick, let me just say, so we're gonna bring we're talking about tyrants, right, throughout history. It's that so I wanted to tell this story because how we relate it to how heroes have this beginning, but then also at the same time it's telling us a tale of the tyrant Astyages. These people rise to power and they feel as though they can kill and order and maim or whatever with no consequence or whatsoever. You know what I'm saying? Because they have no one to answer to, right? So Astyages got one of his servants, and he took the child, and he told the servant, take this child, right? Because he was scared that the child was going to grow up to overcome the kingdom or whatever. And he says, take this child and take him out into the woods and in the field where the animals or the beasts, and leave him there. I want him, he has to die. Like, just kill him, whatever. Take him away, and then let me know when you're done, right? The king, imagine the king, right? The president, right? We call back then kings. Okay, the president, the prime minister. He was scared, right? Because these are just terms that we use to show who is the administrator at the top of our society. The prime minister, the king, the president, right? So imagine that tale. That guy was scared of losing his kingdom or whatever, that he ordered the killing of a baby, right? So that's the story. So the servant didn't want to have his hands dirty in killing the child. So in his own fear for his own safety from future repercussions, because hey, this guy might come back to me later on and say, you killed my grandchild and whatever, right? So he went to one of the cowherds and he called for him and he said, look, so he basically delegated the authority that was given to him to the cowherd and said, take this child out there in the woods and whatever, leave him there. He has to die. Bring me proof that you did it, and don't worry about it. So the cowherd was like, okay. So he went home. He didn't want to do it either. It's a baby, innocent baby. His wife had just had a stillborn. So they left the stillborn out there and raised the child. Now, as the child grew, at one point when he was a young teen or something, the kids were playing Kingdom Court or whatever, and they voted him, or they made him the king, this child. Right, it's Cyrus, but he has a different name, right? Because and while they're playing, he becomes the king of the kids, right? Because they're playing court or whatever, and he whips one of the kids. He says, because you didn't do what I told you, and they made a whole to do, and they brought it to the authorities, right? And Astyages heard about it, and he said, bring me this kid that made himself king in the kids, because they take this stuff serious back in the day. Because they went to the oracles, and the oracles would say certain things. So they take all, they were very mystical about these things, right? So when he heard about this kid that they made king in the group, and he whipped the thing, he brought the kid and he examined him, and he just talked to him, and he kind of figured it out. He said, man, this kid might be. So he called his servant, and the servant became clean. The servant came clear about what happened, and so in the story, here's the things that these stories relate. Is so in the story, Astyages was happy. He said, "Oh wow!" So he kind of said, "Wow, thank God that my grandchild isn't dead. Oh my God, thank God." But he was mad because his servant didn't fulfill his what he was told to do. Tyrant. So he said, okay, we're gonna have a celebration to welcome my grandchild back, right? And servant, send me your son so we can, help prepare, and we'll make a sacrifice, and he's gonna be honored also. Oh, thank you, sir. Of course, you can probably already think of what might happen. And unfortunately, it did happen. So Astyages had the son of the servant killed and chopped and cooked and served at a meal to Astyages, of course, while everybody else ate. But see, I wanted to point that out because that's the tyrant. And throughout history, they it's recorded throughout history as some of the horrible, horrific things that they do and that they order to have done. And in his paranoia, as the story goes on, Astyages runs away and actually later on helps Cyrus overcome the Medes. And so the dream that he had was true. Cyrus, the child who they voted king, grew up and, did his thing and whatever, but he did eventually rule over and conquer Astyages, the Medes. So that was just a really cool story that really jumped out, because in this book, if you want to know about some of these great um, uh, um, figures of history, Alexander the Great, uh, um, Cyrus the Great, the King of Kings, Cyrus the Great, the King of Kings. One of the reasons why they called him the King of Kings is because he didn't just conquer and destroy and maim and everything. He actually united a lot of these nations, which eventually became the Persian Empire, which was huge, but not by killing off those kings that he conquered, by having them join his court, by becoming advisors. He did that over several of the territories that he conquered, which just brought more unification. Because if your nation is being conquered, and they're not just there to kill and maim and steal and plunder, they actually, no, hold on, let's whatever. Okay, well, that kind of shows something to the people that, okay, maybe we could work with these folks. Okay, we're conquered, right? We got conquered, but you know step. So that's why they called him the King of Kings, because he actually united a lot of nations with his rule, and he was a wise. They accredit him with being a very wise king at that. Now, I think towards the end, um, his thirst for conquest, it was what was his downfall, because he died in battle trying to conquer one of his neighbors. He couldn't have it wasn't enough what he had at that point, that he needed a little more, and that little more is what took him out. One of the things that I love about history, especially recent modern history, is I'm not a fan of the Soviet Union, but I am a fan of the history in the Soviet Union, or the history of the Soviet Union. Now, of course, there's plenty of books and stuff about it, but one of the more detailed books that is my go-to book to really know how it was, or not how it was, but maybe because when we think of the tyrant, in modern society, Stalin, he was a tyrant, right? Because he killed his own people and arrested political dissidents or whatever. So that's a tyranny. And in the Gulag Archipelago, by Solzhenitsyn, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, he goes in depth and tells these tales of how the people suffered, how they would be arrested, how they would be charged in kangaroo courts and forced or tortured to admit to crimes and to tell on others, and horrible, horrible, horrible stories of how the government um, uh, would tyrannize their own people through force, through starvation, through an intimidation, all kinds of stuff, right? It says, so when you look at more recent modern history, the Soviet Union, it was like it's almost sort of like if you could think of the United States, because there's different states that united under this revolutionary flag of communism, and they created the Union of Soviet Republics, right? Something like that, USSR. And then when it collapsed, these states, a lot of them broke back into their own little state that got their own government. So now they weren't controlled by this giant federal government of the Soviet government, right? The Communist Party government in the Soviet Union. Once it collapsed, the states broke back down and tried to do their own thing again. Some states kind of gathered and grouped up again and made a federation, the Russian Federation. Other states said they're gonna try democracy, Western democracy, and uh, and early on, when the man, there's just so many awesome documentaries. They're not hard to watch, but when you think about it philosophically, it's like the people fought and struggled for liberty in many different ways in Yugoslavia, and you know while the Soviet Union was about to collapse, some of these states were starting to show a little bit more like freedom. Like letting people do a little more things than they normally would. So the federal government didn't like that because the Soviet Union, in Moscow, they ran whatever, right? It was the federal government, let's say, the one that ran everything, didn't like what some of the states were doing. So when the states would get a little too free, because they didn't like people freedom of speech, they didn't like people partying, they didn't like rock and roll, like they didn't let rock and roll. If you were playing rock and roll, you can go to jail. Like that's the kind of stuff that the Soviet Union would do, right? So when some of these states were showing a little bit too much freedom, they'd send in the army to kind of kill people and arrest people and take the governor out and put a new governor in. You know what I'm saying? The government, the main power government, right? But some of these states, some of these people would fight back. But as the Soviet Union was about to collapse, you could start seeing that they were trying to still use force to control their states and their territories with force. I'm talking about sending in armies and blowing stuff up. You know what I'm saying? Arresting. They had a new president. Because they used to be like the head of the party who ran the nation or whatever. But then when they started trying to do new things, there was a new president. He was trying to do things different. They arrested that fool, and then there was. It's because at that point it was a little confusing because they had a president, but then they had the party, the leader of the Communist Party, and so they were like a conflict, because certain things had started in motion, which couldn't be stopped, which eventually brought the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union. Now, they kidnapped one of them, and while they were trying to invade, crazy shit, right? But so that's the kind of thing that has even happened in modern times. But in that instance, it was like the army didn't want to let go of power. So when tyrants begin to lose their power, when they start seeing that they might lose their power, that's when they begin to tighten their grip, because they see that, at some point in the future, they're not going to be as powerful as they were, right? So you could see in certain nations, they'll use certain instances, certain things that happen, there's a disease or whatever, to tighten their grip around the people, to kind of show them, hey, you're a little too free. Let me remind you who I am. I'm the boss, right? The government. I'm the boss, the king, right? The tyrant, the whatever, that which governs over you. I'm the boss, and I need to remind you folks, who I am. So let me show you my power. Let me shut your stuff down. Let me, turn off your internet. Like in certain places of the world, the tyrant can easily just turn off your internet, shut people's ability to communicate off. In a lot of them nations, that's what they do. Because the tyrant, the sovereign, the power at the top, the government, whoever runs it, has that ability to do so, to cut off Facebook from everybody. And never mind from one person is bad enough, but from everybody. Now, imagine this power during a war, during an incursion, during a time when somebody is attacking a neighbor. Imagine being able to cut off communication from people. Then the tyrant can say whatever he wants to the world through his state-run media apparatuses and tell the world what he wants them to know and withhold the stuff that he does not want them to know. The tyrant has that power. Now, the tyrant doesn't have to be one. It doesn't have to be one person. I mean, there could be a tyranny, like an oligarch tyranny, right? A tyranny of a majority, a tyranny of the minority. You know, if you could think of certain instances where you could see certain things happening. Let's say, look around yourself, right? Look around societal wise around you. You can see things that are happening that don't make sense to you. That, like, who even agrees with this stuff? And when you do the digging, you can find that, well, a certain small percentage of Americans kind of do agree with some of this stuff, but it's everywhere. But it's on the TV. It's in our whatever this thing is, right? The current thing, right? So through state-run media, through state-run apparatuses, the tyrant can control the messaging, right? And when he sees, or when they see that they don't have that much grip on the messaging, they will use force to remind, the subjects who is in charge, right? Oh, you have too much freedom. You're speaking up too loud. You're making too much noise. Shut them down. That's what a lot of these tyrants are doing right now. Just turn on your your nation news, your cable news, and you can see what's going on in other parts of the world where a particular is doing certain things. But while using the power that wasn't given to him, that he when you look into this specific person, you can see how he kind of snaked his way to the top, and he doesn't want to let it go. But when we look at the stories like in Herodotus, of course, you see the same type of thing, because he follows the histories of these certain men that became great stature in history, kings, and they ran big, huge empires, right? And through it all, you can see some of the things, the 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 disregard for human life, the disregard for basic uh, social structures, like they didn't care about their subjects. All right, getting back to Plato. So as they were contemplating how to build a society and who should run a society, he kind of brings up certain ideas, right? Like, for instance, he says, so like the horse trainer. What is it that he does? Does he do things that is good for the horse trainer, or does he do things that's good for the horse? So the proper horse trainer is going to do the things that is good for the horse, the health of the horse, the strength and the health, how to train him, good protecting of the horse, a proper horse trainer, right? So there's something there. It's like, he's in charge of this horse, so he's gonna take care of that horse. He's gonna treat it right. He's gonna wash it, and he's gonna, protect it. That's his, and under his rule, let's say, right? He's the master of the horse. I'm gonna protect you, horse. I'm gonna feed you, horse, right? Okay. So then he says, what about a ship's captain, right? Does he do what's best for the ship, or right? So is he a captain of? Oh my God! So he's a captain of the ship, right? But does he do what's best for the ship, the people on the ship, or kind of like all together, right? Or for himself, right? It's the same kind of question. Is it for himself, for his cargo, for his men, for the mission? What is it that he's in charge? He's in charge of the entire thing, the vessel, the safety of the vessel, those on his vessel, any products in the vessel, and getting to the destination. So there's a lot of authority involved in what the captain of a ship does, right? So, as in the as Plato, as Socrates in the Republic kept speaking about this thing, right? It kind of comes to towards when they just broke it down much more, they get to a point where it's like the kingly person, right, is the one who takes care of himself, who watches for his neighbors, for his family, for those around him, who protects them, but is also firm. You know, there's a lot of like it's like a formula. It's not an unwritten formula, but of many different aspects of a person, which makes them, a proper king, a proper leader, an administrator. You know, as that. To be good, right? So when we look at history, Cyrus did great things, but in the end, something was his demise, whatever his thirst for more, right? As the kingly person that Socrates speaks about is the one who can control that, the master of oneself. Not one who is a slave to himself. If you're a slave to yourself, that means the worst parts about you are in control of the better parts. When you're a master of yourself, that means the best parts, the better parts are superior to the worst parts. The better parts inside of you have tamped down those worst parts. So, in the end, when you think of the kingly person, is one who, has tamped down the evil, let's say, the bad things in his life, and the good is what is raised above the bad, and it reflects in his behavior and his speech and everything that he does, right? So throughout history, there's been some leaders, there's been some great men throughout history that have shown this ability to communicate, this ability to love. Uh, uh, you know, Now, when we're thinking of leaders, it's hard to find. Now, they have their instances of love and things and good things that they do, but those leaders those kings, in quotes, that we look to through history that are of the highest moral or ethics or something, it's like the Buddha, he didn't rule over any nations, but it's like he has risen above that with authority in what he speaks. The authority comes from what is said, The Christ, he didn't rule over any nation. He wasn't a king over nations, yet he rules, in quotes, over many nations and many men. Right? Because many men have subjected themselves to the Christ, right? To this idea of the man who gave his life for his people, right? So throughout history, there's been great leaders, generals who've done great things, and there's been horrible, horrible leaders who have done some horrible, horrible things, and they will continue to do so. Simply because things, one thing that we have to remember, one thing that we have to keep in mind is that the past, history, teaches us about the future. Because these things will continue to happen. Now, in the 20th century has been really bad. But there seems to be a point in the recent modern history where there seems to be an awakening of people throughout the world and throughout the nations that kind of don't want to accept the old ways of doing things anymore. Like the newer, younger generations are starting to see that, hey, these old ways of doing things, these wars and these monetary systems and that's old world think. That's centralized power. Here in America, we have centralized power in the federal government. In any democratic society that has a constitution and a federal government, their power is centralized. Now, depending on their constitution and how their folks live, by what they demand of their government, some places have no freedom of speech. Some places have no rights to defense, like owning of a firearm or those type of things, But it comes back to the people themselves, of what they demand from their leaders. There's elections every year, every couple years. There's local elections, then there's state elections, then there's national elections. In democratic societies across the world, there's elections, right? And one thing that you hear is, it is your duty. It is your duty to vote. It is your absolute duty to vote. That is your God-given right as a citizen of this great nation. Vote. You should vote. Or every last one of you vote. Yay! And then people share their little sticker. I voted today. Hey, great. I participated in the furtherance in the future of our society here by participating in this democratic system, right? And I voted. Yay! Vote, vote, vote. That's all you hear. You should vote. Everyone should vote. Every automatic vote registration, all kinds of stuff is what you hear all the time. But voting is the easiest thing to do. To go into a booth and hit a button, that's the easiest thing you can do. There's nothing to it. There's nothing to that. You could train a bird to do that. You could train an animal to poke the button to push the thing. You can train an animal to do that. What the real work comes in is learning. What is it that you are participating in this society, in this civics? What do I know about the civil society? What do I know about our Constitution? What do I know about the way our city is run, the Constitution of my state? What do I know about who's running and what do they stand for? Maybe their background. What did they study? What did they write their thesis on? That's hard work. To try to learn what these people stand for and what they do or whatever. That's the hard part. The easy part is pushing a button. Anybody can do that. That's the easiest part. The hard work is when you dig into how these folks who are going to be writing your laws, who are going to be running your city departments, who are going to be running your state or your federal government or might become president, learning what it is, their learning about their philosophies, how they think, how they've been taught about what rule, how to rule. Because there's different philosophies, there's different political philosophies that say, to rule one way or to rule a different way. There's many different philosophies, political philosophies. So it is your duty, I would say, as a philosopher, to actually learn about these people and what it is that they want to do with your city or how they want to run your city or your state or your nation. A lot of that stuff has so much to do. We look around, just look around society, whatever. Prices of fuel, prices of gas, prices of food, inflation, whatever. All of that has to do with how and who we send to these places to represent us in our states, in our local elections, in our state elections, in our federal elections. All of that is reflected in. So what you see there is what, it's society. It's a reflection of society. What you see up there at the height of our political system, whether it's a state or local thing, what you see there is supposed to be a reflection of your society. The word politics, the polity is the people. But politics have become its own sport, its own game where only certain people, it takes a certain kind of person to get involved in local politics, in state politics, and federal politics. Now, it is our duty, because they're leaving it up to us to vote for whoever we think, and I would assume that it is in our best interest to try to find someone who is more kingly, the way Plato would say, and how do we know who's more kingly? Not kingly like reserved, self-discipline, all these things that are going to at least give us, look, we're all imperfect. Nobody's perfect. But I think out of if we have 20 people in here and we look into their background and question them and stuff, then we can say, you know what? I think this specific person here is probably more capable of doing this particular job because of his background, because of what he studied, because of his experience, right? But I wouldn't know that if I didn't dig into the past, or have some sort of knowledge about, in quotes, politics or whatever, to follow this person who's trying to, become my governor or my mayor or my president. You know, if all I do is turn on the cable news and I go off by what they say on the screen, whoever it is, whatever sides, whatever's on that screen, if all I go off whatever's on that screen, that screen manipulates our thoughts. Because in some ways we feel as though we're being educated because we're being told, hey, look what's going on in the federal government, or hey, look what's going on in the world. But what we got to remember is what is on that screen always it relies on revenue, it relies on eyes, it relies on clicks, it relies on people being focused on that screen so they can say, they can charge the advertiser, the people who are going to advertise, they can charge a certain specific amount because, hey, look, I got more eyes on the screen at this time. So they try to figure out ways, headlines, sensationalize, whatever, to get your eyes on that screen. But then at the same time, hey, we're just trying to live our lives. I got home from work, I'm tired, I just want to know what's going on in the world. So I trust that this channel that I've been watching since I was little, it's going to be telling me the truth. It's the news. They don't lie to us. Right? So it's not our fault, but we should ask more of ourselves. We ask of our children, we ask of our leaders, right? Our teachers, our principals, we want them to behave in a certain way, right? Our coaches of our favorite teams, damn, we want the best to be at that position. Why? Because we want to win, right? Same concept. We want the best. And see that word, the best. When I say the best, it's a generalization, but conceptually, the best. And how do we know who's going to be the best? Well, we have to do some work. We have to do some work by looking into some things, and not just by going off of what the screen tells us, because it can be to our own detriment, to our own pockets, to the future of our children. Because if the dollar, if our money, wherever nation you're in, if your money loses its value because of stuff that the politicians are doing, that's the future. And as citizens of a nation, as parts of a nation, we need to get a hold of that. Now, many parts of the world don't allow the citizens, but it's time to citizenry across the world to start showing these leaderships, start showing in the who that they work for the people, because as the Christ says, so the Socrates, right, he was talking about the kingly person, right? So the Christ basically said the same thing: is a king is a servant to those that he's over. A president is a servant to those that he is over, right? In America, we say, you work for us, right? The citizenry. That's what it says. Is a king is a servant. So a true king, a true leader, is a servant of those that are under his authority. Like the captain of the ship. Those with authority are to protect and do what is best for those under his authority, under their authority, whether it's one man or many, an oligarchy, a monarchy, even a tyrant. Tyrants have done good things throughout history, but they have done horrible things. Why? Because they have nothing that rules over them. There's not a standard that rules over them. So the people have to start seeing these standards of who they're going to allow to rule over them. No, you know what? This is the standard that we are looking for, or because if we look across the world, when you see these nations, these tyrants fighting with their neighbors, trying to take their land, killing innocents, killing of innocent people, What other reasons can it be? Other than for conquest and land. And then when you do some studying, you can see, oh no, this person wants to revive, rebirth, reborn the past because his old ways of thinking. He's an older leader, this particular guy. Doesn't matter who he is, but he's an older leader. His modes are old world modes. Conquer your neighbor, use force, poison and kill and arrest those who oppose you. People speak up, arrest them. That's old world think. Some of the leaders here in America have that same old world think. You speak out of line, they want to shut you down. They want to shut your businesses down. They want to take your ability to communicate away. That is old world think. And what I, as an observer, what I see and I kind of start feeling is that the newer generation are going to save us because they don't play that no more. The newer generations ain't about centralized control. They don't like that. They like their own liberties. You know, and in the new generation, they don't even, there's something special about that. Because like a few, like my son and some of my nephews, it's not even about the money anymore. You know, it's like, it's not about money. And that's great because I just got to that point where it's like, it's not about money. So it's like this new world, this the new way of thinking that the old world tyrants, right? The old world leaders who are still in power in some places, and even here in America, their ways of thinking are outdated, and they know and they see that the people are starting to learn that they have the power, and they're trying to tighten their grip as much as they can whenever they can. Pandemics, whatever, anything. They're going to use any excuse to tighten their grip to remind you who's in charge. But we, the people, you, wherever you are in the world, you, the power resides in you, because in the end, you are the one that's going to be fighting the battles. You are the one that's going to be feeding your children or planting the seeds of the corn or whatever. You are the one that's going to rebuild the blown up buildings. You are the one that's going to vote for whoever's going to run your nation. You are the one. All the power resides in you, inside of each and every one of you. You are the sovereign. Unfortunately, some of your nations don't allow that, but you are the sovereign. Don't be a tyrant. Because if you are a tyrant, if you allow things that you wouldn't do if you, in your mind, if you say, oh, well, that doesn't matter, that's not my nation being attacked, that's not my people, whatever. If you start thinking that way, then there's no wonder that people that rule over you do these things, because you have taken a back seat. You got to be active. But active isn't just about pushing a button on a screen for who you want to vote for. Being active is educating yourself about history, modern history, ancient history, about religions. Learn the ways of the world so you can be aware when these things are coming. There's nothing mystical about it, nothing prophetic about it. You will learn. Learn. History shows us that the tyrant has always existed, and the tyrant will always exist. Always. It always will. Until we change who we are, society will change. And then the tyrants will one day not be around anymore. Who knows if and when? But maybe so. Maybe that's when they say the earth will be like heaven, when everything's at peace. But it all comes down to us. That's it. That's it. All right. All right, guys, man. Sorry, I get a little passionate there, man. But, okay. Calm. Nice and easy. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed what we talked about there. And I know I did, and this is my jam. So, if you did, I would like to ask that if you like what you heard, please tell your friends about it. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if it is your first time with us today. This is what we do. We talk, we jump around, but we do it. This is how we do it, okay? Yeah, that's it. So if you are new to our show, I want to welcome you and I want to thank you. And just, if you like what you heard, please subscribe. Go over to the YouTube page, subscribe there. Follow us on Facebook for all of our shareable content there. I love being here with you. I miss every moment. But I am here and I enjoyed it very much. So I want to thank you very much. What else? Anything else that I got to say? No, that's it. So in the meantime, please, folks, stay safe out there. Stay healthy. Keep educating yourself. You're the sovereign. Don't be a tyrant. All right? All right, folks. In the meantime, stay safe. Stay healthy. Keep educating yourself. And I'll see you guys soon. All right? Peace out, folks.
This is Thesis.